Welcome everybody to today's edition of Tailored Turnings. In our last video we talked about clocks a little bit and showed you some projects that are in process and also some future projects and ideas. Today we're going to switch gears a little bit and we're going to talk about some seam rippers. So I wanted to go through the process, kind of start to finish, break it up for you. As I said in the last video, there's not really enough to where you could break it up into different segments. These are very similar to pens. The bodies of them are the same. The materials are basically the same. The only difference is the cartridge is a seam ripper instead of a pen. So everything that you're seeing here, you've seen somewhat in a previous video where I showed turning the body down, the acrylic down for the pen. And this time we're going to do a seam ripper, but I thought I would be a little bit more elaborate in showing you not just the process like I did last time of turning the acrylic, but also the materials that go into making the seam ripper or a pen, either one, but in this case the seam ripper, and show you the materials, how I get them, how they arrive, the materials that we pick out, the instructions, the tools, some safety equipment, some stuff like that. So be right back. I'll turn the camera around and I'll show you what we're going to look at here. Okay, guys, so here we are back. I'm going to try and film using this method. I'm still struggling with the GoPro, so we're on an iPhone on a tripod. So I apologize if it gets a little shaky or you can't see quite perfectly like you would on another type of camera. We'll try and get that worked out in the future, but for today, we're going to try this with an iPhone and a selfie stick, tripod kind of thing. So, as I said, these are seam rippers, and so this particular set, you can buy these individually, but this particular set I bought from Penn State Industries, and this set it's kind of hard to see there. Try and get some better lighting for you, but this particular set has two seam rippers that are double-ended, so a small and a larger version of it. And then it also has two seam rippers that are just singles with kind of a pen clip. I don't traditionally use the pen clip because that does limit you. We'll go into that, or you'll see it more when I make the body or form the body. All of these on this box, boy, this is terrible. All of these that are on this example here in the box are acrylic. And I think we might do a mixture, but you'll see why I don't use the pen clips. They are a little bit limiting on the diameter that you can make the body, and any type of designs that you put into it. The pen clip comes down so far and it's really narrow out from the center, so it does make it a little tough. And so I don't traditionally use the clips, the pocket clip or pen clip, whatever you call it there, that you can see on these two red ones here. So this particular box, they come in as a set of 4. I don't remember the price on these, but the part number is there if you have any interest. You can go to Penn State Industries, PSI Woodworking as it says here, and look up this kit and it'll tell you what the set sells for. So cool thing about buying this as a set, as you see here in the description, it does come with the cartridges for the seam rippers, but then it also comes with your bushings to set up to use on your mandrel for when you're turning the body. And you'll see what that all means later on in the video. But it's nice because it is kind of a starter set, if you will. I don't really need the bushings because I have them already. But by the time you bought these individually, you would exceed the price. And the bushings are basically free. They do wear down over time, but it takes a really long time. You really shouldn't be turning your bushings at all. You shouldn't touch them with your tools. They're metal. But so it would take a long time, but it's just more cost effective, and I was able to get a variety. I did buy, with the same purchase, I did buy 4 or 5 individual seam rippers that it's just a different style. I just bought them individually because they had a little bit different style to them. They actually have a mini scissors in the end of them too. So we'll probably do a separate video, or maybe I'll just show a version of that once I get them turned. So anyway, So once you open up this box, nothing in there now, but once you open this up, then what you see here is what you end up getting. So these two here are, this doesn't look any different really, except for these two here are made for the large and the small blades. So it's the double ones, and then these are the singles. The center brass tube that goes in them is the same size on both of them, meaning you'll see, but we'll drill out the center of our media, our body, and we'll insert this brass tube in there. And so these are the same size for both kits. So, and then these are the bushings. There's 3 of them in here because you do use a combination of them depending on which one of these 2 kits you're using. So that takes care of the seam ripper cartridges, if you will. And then they do come with the set of instructions. It tells you real clearly how it's going to go together, the materials that you're going to need, some of the features, the required accessories, how to prepare the blank, or the body as I call it. This is an instruction on how to lay things out on your pen mandrel. I'll show you a mandrel here in just a minute. And then this down here at the bottom gives you an orientation of your bushings depending on which kit you're going to be turning the body on and assembling. So this is kind of everything that comes in that box. And they send a new one of these out with either every box kit, or if you buy them individually, you'll get one of these in every individual little bag that you buy. So I keep a 3-ring binder full of these, and some of them are duplicates, some of them I just have done one. But I keep these around just in case I should ever have to take this thing back apart, or I order a kit where it doesn't come in. Or sometimes if you mess something up, you might have an extra kit that's just got spare parts in it. And so it's nice if you want to build something later on to know the specifics of some other parts that you might need. Like, you can buy brass tubes anywhere. You can go to a hobby store or Ace Hardware. There's some other places where you can go and just buy regular brass tubes. And so if you had extra parts laying around, you could build another one of these kits kind of out of your own raw materials. So next, as far as the raw materials that are going to go into building it, we're going to have some different styles of acrylic that I'll show you here, or some different colors of acrylics. There's as much as your imagination could possibly get out there and imagine. There's different styles of acrylics to choose from. If you go to Penn State, that's a good source for them. Woodcraft is another source for them. This green one's the same as the one that's already out there. So, there's just a ton of different styles of these things. They generally come about 3/4 inch by 3/4 inch square, and then they're usually 5 inches long. So, and these are just all different. Try and turn them up right here to show a little bit better. So these are just all different styles of acrylics that are already pre-made for you. And generally, these things will run you, I think they will run you anywhere from $5 to $10, depending on, and none of these say. But anyway, $5 to $10, depending on, where you're getting them from, whether they're on sale or not. These things go on sale all the time. There are a bunch of artisan, not artisan wood turners, but there's a bunch of artisans out there that actually they have formed a business in just making blanks. So you can go out there and look up acrylic blanks, and there'll be a lot of different people with web pages of styles that they've created on their own, pouring their own acrylic resin. Total Boat Epoxy is one that people use a lot that I've seen. There's a couple of other different epoxies out there, or acrylics that people will make, and you insert kind of your own stuff into the middle of it, chips and mica powders and stuff like that. So just gives you a lot of different choices. There's thousands and thousands of choices out there. If you don't want to go that route, and I kind of like to do a mix. I do like the variety and how these turn out, but some people like a more traditional pen. So in that case, what we're going to use today for one of them is I had some walnut left over from some blanks that I cut anyway. I had some walnut left, and this one is a little bit shorter, but it'll work out fine. So we are going to make one out of just strictly wood walnut. It's pretty dark, obviously, but it does have good graining. For anybody that knows anything about walnut, it's one of the more treasured woods out there, I would say. Still pretty easy to turn. It does sand out really nice, and it does take a stain or a clear very nice. And this stuff has been cut up and in my garage for long enough that it's equalized to the environment humidity-wise. So this stuff will be good. We're going to make one out of that, and I'll choose maybe a couple of these to make out. But the other option that you have, so this is kind of the two extremes of the spectrum here. You've got either the straight acrylic or you've got the natural wood, and you can pick out many different woods. The last video I showed you some crepe myrtle. I showed you some crimson bottle brush. I've got oak, I've got cherry, I've got mahogany, and then in oak you got a couple different varieties. You got white oak, red oak, bog oak. I mean, there's all kinds of different choices out there. You got maple. Try and stay away from the pine. If you ever, pine you can buy for nothing. It's a scrap wood. Really, in a woodworker shop, it's a scrap wood used for support for things, shelving, but to try and turn it, it's going to gum up your tools. Try and stay away from those species that have a lot of sap in them, and pine has probably got the most. So it's a couple other species. Do your homework on this stuff first, guys. When you start turning it, do your homework before you ever start laying a tool to it, whether it be cutting it on your bandsaw or just cutting a period or spinning it on your lathe. Do your homework on it. Make sure that it's not something that's identified as extremely hazardous to begin with, meaning the dust. There are a lot of species out there that you don't want anything to do with. They're pretty, they're easy to come by, but you don't want that dust up in the air around you. But then there's other species out there that maybe you react to that are, it's a natural product. So, some people are going to have allergies to it, and it's going to be an irritant. Whereas I might grab a hold of the same thing, turn it all day long, and never react to anything. So, just do your homework on it. Make sure you know what you're getting into before you start messing around with natural wood. There's a lot of good information out there to be had. You can do an easy search and find it. So, as I said, these are kind of the two polar opposite ends of the spectrum. You use the same tooling on them, or you can, to spin them and cut them on the lathe. But the next is kind of what I call the hybrid. So you've seen in prior videos, I've shown you some examples of this. So I bought this material in a very, very large block. The company that I bought it from makes acrylic tables. They're about 2 inches, maybe 2.5 inches thick. And they had made one that was either rectangular or square. And for whatever reason, it looked like they sold it to somebody that loved the table, but wanted it round. So they had these triangular ends that they cut off from making the table, square to begin with, and then cut it round, a circle out of it. So they had the corners left out that were all rounded off kind of triangle things. But anyway, they're really big, about 1.5 by 1.5 triangle. And so for me, this stuff is small, right? So I can just take this down and cut it into usable stuff for me, what otherwise would have been scrap for them. I think I paid $50 for the 2 hunks of it. 2 of them were already gone, but I did manage to get 2 of them. And all that this is a wood. It's a native wood to Florida. I couldn't tell you what it is. It is spalted a little bit. By spalting, I mean you get a little bit of rot inside the wood, and it's not full-on rot yet. It hasn't degraded, but the rot starts getting down into the graining of the wood. And though a little bit harder to see here because this is rough sawn, once you turn that out, it's going to give you a lot of figuring and pattern to it. So couldn't tell you what the variety of wood is here. So again, with the safety things earlier, I'm kind of rolling the dice, but I've turned a bunch of this stuff and it does not bother me whatsoever. So, and obviously they cut it and used it in their project, and I they didn't have any issues with it either. So, but the acrylic, they mix this up and they add pigments to it, and they color it the way that they want it colored. And this wood that's in here was nothing special. It was just leftover chunks. So if you expanded this out and kind of used your imagination, this is just a huge 4 foot by 4 foot table that had random chunks of wood with acrylic poured over it. And once you flatten that and sand it and polish it, it's, you know, there's tons of acrylic tables out there that you'll look around and find where they use wood and they pour an acrylic river down the middle of it. It's kind of the same thing as what they're doing here, just a little different style. But anyway, I was able to cut just a ton of these blanks, and I cut some that are larger that I use for wine bottle stoppers, but these here, I cut a ton of these in 3/4 by 3/4 roughly for doing pens and seam rippers, and I've made a lot of them already out of this. I love it. It's pretty interesting stuff, and the fact that the acrylic does not have a lot of metallic. It has some in it, but it's kind of hard to see here, but it's very transparent. So the tube that will end up going down the middle of this, you'll drill a hole down the middle of this, and you'll see this later on, but you'll drill a hole, and when you put that tube in there, you're going to want to paint the tube because it's just brass. Otherwise, you're going to see that brass right through it, and it's going to look gold on the inside, and it does not do justice to the material. But I don't know if you can quite see it here, but you can definitely see my finger shadowing behind that material if I hold it up to the light. Well, imagine that's brass tube and gold. It's really going to show through. So what I've done in the past or learned is that when I cut this material down, you know, this is longer than what I need. So for a couple reasons, I'm going to choose to use this end with the 2 hunks of wood in it, and use this end here will be my discard, my waste. I save it because there's other purposes I can use it for, but try and put as much of the wood in the body as I can, and so the blue would just be an accent. But then I also paint my tube. The brass tube that goes inside, I'll paint it either white or black. It's amazing the difference between the two. The black will totally turn this navy. The blue part's navy blue, and the white will turn it a light blue, and both are equally gorgeous in my mind. That's not a pat on my back, guys. That's just a pat on the back of the person that poured the resin, because this stuff does turn out real nice. You'll see it. There's some posted out on the Instagram, tailored turnings. You go out there and look at it, you'll see some that are out there, and this stuff really turns out nice. So we're going to make one of those as well. Out of this pack of 4, we'll make one natural, one hybrid, and then I'll pick out a couple colors of the acrylic. We're probably gonna lean more into purple. I think we'll do purple, and we'll probably do like a green. So if you go to Penn State Industries or Woodcraft or Rockler, is another good source for them. There's a lot of different sources for kits out there if this is something that interests you in getting into. I kind of talk through these videos like it's somebody that hasn't done it before, I guess almost by necessity. But if this is something that's interesting to you, then look up those other resources that I mentioned, and you know, see if there's something out there that really piques your interest. You know, it can get expensive, but generally speaking, if you ever wanted to sell this off, it'd be pretty easy to sell it off and easily recover what you had invested in it. But you know, I don't do it to get rich. I do it because I love doing it, but it is kind of nice to sell them off and get your investment back so you can move on to other projects. So anyway, that takes care of the raw materials. So let's talk about some tooling for a minute. So once we get over to the lathe, so I'll show you the lathe. You guys have seen this before, but so this is my lathe. I actually have an extension bed that goes to the right on this, but I don't usually use it because, you know, my stuff is 5, 6, 7 inches long generally, so I don't need that extension bed taking up room. So, but when you go into the lathe, there's a couple things that you're going to need. First and foremost, you're going to need a chuck. And I do not have this set up for pen blanks. I should have had that ready to go already. But there's different ways to go about doing this. I prefer to drill my blanks on the lathe. It's more stable. You're more likely to drill a straight center line hole down through the middle of the blank, which is going to form the body of this particular project. It holds it really tight. You're not likely going to have it fly off on you, and it drills it very straight. Now, these jaws are a little bit different when you were putting that blank in the middle of it. And I should have had that ready to go. So I apologize, but there's some other jaws that go on this that sit just a little bit different. And I'll kind of line them up here. So your blank would go in the middle of this, kind of diagonally, if you will. And then when you clamp this chuck down, it's going to draw these in. These two pieces here go in place of these. So it's got a screw mechanism on the side of it, and these jaws all go in uniformly, and they squeeze down on it. And so in this case, it's going to take these two jaws, and it's going to squeeze on the square. And it'll hold it really, really tight. And that's mounted on the motor side of the lathe. So this is the part that'll be spinning. On the other side of the lathe, on the right-hand side, you're going to have a drill chuck. So this particular lathe, I won't get into the real technicalities of it, but this takes a Morris taper number 2. And so this drill chuck is set up for that. And it's the taper of the mandrel on each end of the lathe. Depending on if you buy a lathe, most of them are what we call Morris taper MT2. You'll see that in descriptions, but you would just have to make sure that if you're buying stuff like this, that you're buying the right taper design for your lathe. There's MT1 and I think there's an MT3 out there too, but both of those are kind of rare compared to the MT2. It's more standard, and that's not by manufacturer. So you could have a bunch of different manufacturers' lathes out there, and MT2 is a universal sizing amongst them. So MT1 would be universal as well, but far fewer lathes have an MT1. So this drill chuck here will take a normal drill bit in the end of it, just like, you know, a portable drill or a corded drill, battery operated drill, whatever. It's the same drill bit that'll go on the end of it here. Some people do like to use brad points. They get really expensive. For what we're doing here, a normal drill bit, general purpose, or a high speed steel, you don't need cobalt, you don't need a center point. Center points do work out a little bit nicer in one aspect because this material is fairly small at 3/4 of an inch. If you're off a little bit, you don't have things mounted up, you could get into a situation where you drill off center or kitty corner across the material, and not having much to work with, you can get into a situation where you ruin your blank. I haven't done it because I take a lot of time in setting it up and try and make sure that everything's square before I drill it. But anyway, this just takes a normal drill bit in the end. And in this particular kit, it does call for an 8mm drill bit. I have a couple of metric drill bits, but most of my stuff is SAE sized or fractional. And so I'll just line up the brass tube with my traditional fractional drill bits and figure out which one is the best, you know, fit for it. It does have to be just a little bit bigger than the brass tube because you do glue those in. So everybody knows what a chuck key is. So the chuck key is usually sold with this. This is not an expensive item, guys. This is a Harbor Freight model. There's others that are out there, but this thing is fixed in place, so it does not spin. So the 20 or whatever, I can't remember how much this was. It's not very expensive, but it works great. It stays in place. It's fixed. It clamps down on the bits tight. I really have not had any issues with it, and this is a Harbor Freight. This is not an expensive tool. The chuck, on the other hand, this is a, I should have told you this, but this is a Nova 3 chuck, and Nova is probably one of the foremost manufacturers of chucks that are out there. There are a couple other companies out there, but These things get expensive. They are precision machined, and they do have a screw mechanism inside of them that draws these 4 jaws down all equal pressured with just one turn of the screw. And so they do get a little expensive. I want to say this was 180 bucks. So, I mean, not terrible expensive. You know, it's probably a one-time purchase. Again, it's universal. It's, if you change lathes later on, this same chuck, as you see here in the center of it, this is a screw-on chuck, so this goes on the motor side, but this is universal. So this will go on the next, you know, lathe if I ever replace the one that I have now. Even with a different brand. So as long as it's got the same size, it'll screw on there. So the next piece of tooling that we're going to talk about here would be the mandrel. So this mandrel, this particular one that I bought, came from Woodcraft. And so in this piece here, if you loosen up this nut here, this tube, if you will go in and out of this all the way through the end. And your lathe has a hole in the end as well where this mounts. And so this would be spinning, this would be motor side as well, but it would be tapered versus screwed on. And once you get your blank drilled and your brass tube installed, then you're going to slide that onto this mandrel and adjust it to length, tighten that down, and then you're going to use this set screw on the end of it to squeeze that blank. Squeeze the blank in the middle of it, and that's going to tighten the blank down onto this, basically squeezing it tight enough that this becomes one with the blank. So your blank is, once you got it drilled and your brass tube installed, you're going to put your blank in the middle of that. You're going to cut it to length for the tube, but anyway, you're going to drill down through the middle of this blank, and you're going to end up inserting it with these bushings. Now you only use 2 bushings at a time. Sorry guys. So these bushings will end up going in the end of that brass tube. They're not going to stay where I put them, of course. Why would they? So they're going to go in the end of that brass tube. So the part that you see that's smaller there, that actually recesses into the tube on both ends. So imagine, if you will, I should have had one of these drilled already, I guess. But imagine, if you will, it's going to insert into the brass tube in the middle of the blank as far as that shoulder is. And then these, along with the brass tube and the blank, are what's going to go on this pen mandrel and get squeezed down. So only the larger part of these bushings will be sticking out of the ends. Now why is that important? Well, your kits all have a ferrule on the end. So take a look at the pens that you have in your drawer. You know, you got the little cap on the end that you pull off to replace your ink refill. That cap or ferrule, that's a particular size. And on the other end of it, you've got your click mechanism, or your, you know, if it's not a click pen, you've got just kind of a finial on the end of it, or a cap on the end of it. It's maybe gold or brass or chrome, or if you got a cheap pen, a plastic cap on the other end of the tube. And that's also a particular size. So what these bushings do is, as you're turning this material round, they tell you how far down to turn, because you can't turn any further than what your tool would hit the bushing. Again, you don't really want to do that. So you only want to turn it down until the ends are that particular size. And where the artistry comes in, or the interpretation, your design, if you will, you can do anything you want, except on the ends, you have to make them the size of these bushings. Anything you want in the middle is free game. If you wanted to leave part of that square, you could. It's not my style, but... So you can make this real bulbous, you know, if you're imagining. You're turning this round, you can make it real round with a big arc in the middle of it, all the way down to the end. You could make several arcs. You could make little individual arcs to make it more like your fingers. A favorite design of mine is a bulbous, you know, a rounded part about halfway down, a rounded part on the other end about halfway down, and then just a little raised area in the middle. So that's kind of a good design for me. You can kind of see a little bit here, the different designs that you can turn that to. And you can do anything you want. Again, in the middle, it's totally open to your interpretation. But this down here, where you see this part sticking out, this would be your cap. This is actually the seam ripper that you see here, but turned around and inserted. So when you're storing it, you store the seam ripper inside. But that's why you got the bushing, is because you're going to actually turn to the diameter of this cap. And then on the other end, you're going to have, in this style, you've got a pen clip, which is separate from the cap itself. So that's where I say you can either use it or not. But if you see here on the end, you've got that little round cap, and that bushing on the other end is going to tell you how far to turn to get the diameter of that cap, right? I don't use the chain style. They do have it in there, but I don't like this style. This would be for like a chain to go around your neck. So it's just not for me. Again, totally open to your desire of what you want to do with the design. And the reason that there's different diameters of these, that's not probably going to show up, but the reason that there's two different diameters here is just based upon the kit. So in most of these kits, they're the same on each end, but on some of them, they'll have a smaller cap than what they do, the end sticking out, be it a pen or be it a seam ripper. This is usually the bigger end and the cap is the smaller end. No, not always, but again, those instructions will kind of lay out for you exactly what they are and then where you're going to place those bushings at. Again, this is kind of a visual of how that mandrel is going to look. You can see the solid line here is kind of showing you what your end product is going to look like once it's turned, but it shows you exactly where to put your end bushing at depending on which style you're using. So in this case, you're going to use the two large bushings, one on both sides. If you're making a double-ended, and if you're making a single-ended, you're going to use a small and a large. So that's why they do that. That's why they give you two different sizes. Now, other kits that are out there that you buy individually, they're not going to come with these bushings, but they always tell you what the part number is for the bushings that you need. So you can order those up. And again, if you get into doing these routinely enough, always save these bushings. I mean, there's no sense in getting rid of these. They're steel, and you really shouldn't be touching them again. They're not going to wear down. But you save those, you put them right back in a bag with the part number on them, and that way, if you ever buy a kit again, you don't have to buy a new set of bushings. They're not real expensive to replace if you needed to, but you might as well hang on to them. So the other thing that you're going to need is the cutting tool. This is going to be what you hold to shape the blank, to turn it around and shape it. Now this particular one here, this is an easy wood. Maybe I wasn't showing that correctly. So this is the tool. It's got a wood handle on it. I love this brand. It's very heavy, meaning heavily made. It's robust. It's not going to come apart on you. This one is longer than, this is a mini, but it is longer than what I need for doing pens. You could buy the pen versions of this and get 4 or 5 of them really for the price of what one of these is, but I like the longer length just in case you decided to make bowls or spindles for a stairway, chair legs, stuff like that. You're going to be cutting stuff that's harder and bigger around. You really want this longer tool. So, but if you're only going to do pens and small stuff, maybe you're doing this stuff in a second bedroom of your house. This could go in a closet, really, almost. If you got a spare closet out there that's big enough, you could put this on a table or a workbench in a closet and do this stuff. I mean, it just really doesn't take up much room. So this particular brand is Easy Wood. This one, when I bought it, it came with, as you can see here, a square cutter. And what this is it's a 4-side, It's a 4-side round, or I'm sorry, this one here is a 4-side square cutter, and I'll show you what that looks like. So, which is actually what I have mounted in here. Let me see if I can get this in the camera. So there you go. I don't know if it'll focus in for you. There we go. Maybe that's a little better. So this one's got some chips out of it. Unfortunately, it fell, and so it broke some chips out of it. But this is what I mean by carbide. All 4 sides of this are, well, this whole thing is one big hunk of carbide. But then, it probably won't show here, they are cut on an angle, bevel cut back. And so as you use this tool on various projects, and you start getting a little dull on one side, you just loosen up that screw and you turn this tip, and you got a new side again. In this case, there's 4 sides. But you don't have to go out and buy a whole new tool every time if you didn't want to, which I have not yet. This whole entire tool right here is 90 bucks, and this one, I chose it with the square bit. It doesn't really matter what bit you choose initially. Square is probably the most universally used, or should say very common. I did choose to go out and buy a different bit that goes on the end of here. These are just held on with a little Allen screw. The bits are, I think, $17 to get a replacement, somewhere around in there. And I normally run this with a radius bit. And so instead of being completely round like this, each surface has a radius to it instead of being straight across. It's pretty minor. You can buy them in different radiuses. But what it does is you're working this material on this straight cutting bit like this. Again, I keep moving it around trying to get a good visual. But if you're using the straight cutting bit on this, each corner, as you're working the material, you got to be careful because it'll leave a line. You know, your material's spinning around. So if you use the radius bit, you kind of run less risk of leaving a line in the material that you're going to have to sand out before you put any finish on it. So that's a little bit about the EasyWood tools, and they do sell these in multiple sizes, multiple varieties. You can buy them already with other types of bits on there. There's a detailed bit that is triangular shaped, so it's actually got 2 triangles, a real narrow triangular point to it. That's for doing a real detailed, or when you're going to put a real crisp line. I don't have anything to show you because I don't have a detail bit. If you're going to put a crisp line into the middle, let's say, that detail bit works out good for that. There's a bit that can go on the end, or you can just buy the whole thing, whichever you want. There's another bit that will go on the end of it that is completely round. So that one kind of gives you the infinite adjustment, or, you know, usable surfaces that you can just loosen up the screw, turn it a little bit, go back, and you've got another sharp edge again. These don't wear down very fast. You'll destroy these faster by banging them and dropping them on the ground, hitting the side of your machine, because they will break if you run them into a piece of metal. You'll damage these quicker by doing that, and I have, than what you will wear them out on this acrylic or on any wood. So they last for a really long time. So after you get the acrylic all turned down into the general shape that you want it, and you take it, you know, when you start off, you're taking some pretty good chunks out of this because you are turning it round. This is spinning so fast on the lathe that as this square is spinning around, imagine it spinning at, you know, a few thousand revolutions per minute. The visual appearance of it at that speed, meaning the appearance that the bit is seeing, is round, because these corners are turning so fast, and you're not just gouging that tool in there. You know, you're taking your time with it, so you're really taking small cuts out of this each time, but it's turning so fast that the surface that the bit is seeing is really round. You think about revolutions per minute, or in this case, the number of times that these 4 edges hit that bit in 1 minute. So if you're turning 3,000 revolutions per minute on your lathe to get this rounded out, that bit is seeing this material a lot. As you start turning and you get more round, maybe you slow your lathe down a little bit, because you know, if you're into math like I am, the further down that you make this square, so you're going to make it round, but the smaller that round portion is, even if your lathe is at a fixed revolution per minute, the smaller, maybe this is getting too technical, but the smaller that circle is, since your lathe is a fixed revolution per minute, the smaller that circle is, the more revolutions per minute you're going to get. So think about it on a gear on your bike. So as you change your gears, you're changing the size of that sprocket that chain is riding on. Well, it's the same thing here. As you're cutting into this, you're making this material smaller and smaller and smaller. So depending on what end of the bike it is, either the pedal end or the back tire end of the bike, it's going to have an effect on how fast that bike goes. Well, it's the same thing here. It's not changing the speed of the motor, so it's not changing how fast you're pedaling, but it's changing how fast the bike is going, or how fast this material is really going around in relationship to your tool, which is fixed in your hand. So as you start turning this, you may want to slow down your speed, because you'll start getting heat building into this material and into the tool. Truthfully, your hand will get warm, hot if you're going too fast. So plus the cutter reacts differently, so you may want to slow down your lathe. Sorry for getting too technical there, guys, for anybody that's not into math geek like I am. That's kind of what goes on with the material as you're cutting. You want to be careful and just feel it. You know, that's why these tools are designed the way that they are. You'll see and you'll feel it. Again, I kind of make these videos. Sorry, guys. I kind of make these videos as if, you know, you guys haven't done any of this before. But when you hold this tool, this is not going to focus well, but when you hold this tool, you're going to hold this tool, guys, kind of with your finger and your thumb kind of out here on the end of it. Oh, wow, I wish I could get that to focus. And then the other end of it is kind of going to be up here, you know, with your hand and your arm kind of bracing the end of that tool. I can't get it far enough away here really to focus, but that's why they're as long as what they are. So if you buy the shorter versions of this, or you go out and you buy the tools that are specifically made for pen turners, which are really short, that portion that comes up your forearm to steady it is greatly reduced. So this portion here where you see it step down, down in this area, those shorter tools are only about that long. And so all of the strength that you're putting into that tool, or using your arm to stabilize that tool, the reason I like this length is it comes way up. It's almost, you know, a good portion up to my elbow there. So I've got a lot of torque behind this tool to make sure it doesn't go anywhere. On those smaller pen tools that are out there, and you're holding them, you know, depending on if you're way up on it or whether your comfort level is back here, but all of that is resting on your wrist. So there's no support. Imagine that tool is bobbed right here, and that was the end of it. All of the support for that tool is in your wrist, and you get none of this back here. So as that's spinning around, you're not nearly as safe as what you are with a little longer. And they make these really long. I mean, this is a mini, so imagine how long they make these handles. The tool on the end is generally the same, but you can imagine how long they make these tools. They'll go way past the length of your elbow, and that's just to get stability on it as you're turning really big stuff, really big bowls, maybe hard material. The more leverage you have there, probably the safer you are. So anyway, that's my little spiel about the tool. I don't have a particular preference. I like Easy Wood. They come already assembled. Their handles are colored, different colors So as you accumulate more of them, and maybe you have one that's got a round bit, a square bit, a radius bit, the triangle bit, which is your detail bit, the handles being different colored, you could paint them yourself, but if you're buying them that way and you're spending 90 bucks on a tool, why not have a good tool to go along with it? So spend the money on this stuff, guys. Don't cheap out. I know it gets expensive, but don't cheap out. So next, after you've got everything turned around, then you're going to go after it with some sandpaper. And this has not been cleaned up in a long time. These are not fresh pads, but each one of these little square pads here is what's called micro mesh. The larger sections here, these are sheets of wet dry sandpaper that I cut down into strips that are usable for me. And I have 4 different grades here. This one happens to be 600. I have 400, 220, 320. So yeah, 220, 320, 400, 600. And it's wet. And so you can use that, and I do use them dry too, but you can use them wet, which is preferable with the acrylics because you want to keep it cool, keep your dust, keep this stuff clean, unlike what you see here. Because as this is riding around with that material on the lathe, if it's not clean, you're going to carve grooves in, all the way around it. You're going to put little scratches all the way around, and they're hard to get out with dirty sandpaper. So either cut new strips when you do it. Don't do what I do here and use them on other stuff. So I won't use this on the acrylic. I'll get new strips cut. Then your micro mesh, you want to keep these. So I keep this in this little tackle box tray. This is a Plano tackle box tray that I had left. And these fit in there really nice. And I kind of keep them in order so I know what the grains are. These ones are heavily used. They're kind of, at least on the rougher grit, so the 1500 through maybe 2400. As you can see on this chart, this first 3 here, they're getting a little worn. And not that they won't still work, but they're not cutting it the way that I want to cut. Anything much smoother than that, you start getting into the 32, 3600, so on and so forth. And really up here in the fuchsia colored, which is a 12,000 grit. Once you start getting up into that grit, you're doing it for the higher up you go, the more you're doing it for shine, and the less you're doing it for detail or cutting the material. You're really just buffing it at that point. I do go one step further after running through these. So you kind of start off rough and you move your way up. And each time you're removing the scratches from the prior. So when you first start, you're removing the scratches from the tool. You move up, the next sandpaper is taking out the scratches from the prior. Then again, the next sandpaper is taking out the scratches from the prior. So each time you're only taking out the scratches from the prior. You're not using 1500 grit sandpaper to define your project. You're not cutting shape with the 1500 grit sandpaper. If you were, you'd be there forever and you'd run through hundreds of these. So once you get to the sandpaper phase, it's hard to remember. Be as clean as you can with your tool. Get your shape, but smooth it out. Be gentle. Be smooth. I can't say that enough. To make your sanding much easier, because your sanding is not putting shape into the material. Your sanding is only for removing the scratches from the prior level. So as you start moving through here, that's why I say these first 3, you burn them up faster. You'll spend more time on the material with these first 3 micro meshes and of course the 4 priors than what you will with the subsequent, because the subsequents after that, maybe it's 5, maybe it's 3, I don't know, but somewhere in that general range here as you're looking at the chart. The last 4, 5, 6 of them in that chart, the finer you go, the more you're just polishing your work out. So probably not even really dealing with the visible at that point. It's really for sheen. And in fact, if you're not making something that you want a lot of luster to, some people like the more natural finishes, You're probably still going to get into the micro mesh pads most likely on a natural finish like the wood one that we're going to do, but you're probably going to stop, at either 15 or 1800. And with wood projects, you don't want to use a whole lot of water on it. So that's another reason to stay out of the micro meshes. You want water on this because this, as you can see, these are in terrible saved condition, but that residue that's on here, that residue may not be the grit of what's underneath, and it may have its own grit to it that's more coarse. So if you're not keeping this clean, and you can clean them, once this goes back in the water, that residue will come right off, but that grit may be more coarse than the paper or the micro mesh that I'm using. And so as I set that on the material, now I put scratches back in that I was really hoping to get rid of, and it could be several layers. It could be, that picks up a piece of grit from the sandpaper over here at a 220, and you're on a 3200 grit micro mesh, but it's got a grit of that on it. Now your piece has seen 220 again. Maybe not the whole thing, maybe it's just a line, but you want to keep that stuff clean before you put it on your acrylic or anything you're really polishing for a high luster. As you guys have seen before, sorry about not having this set up, but as you guys have seen before, after I get done with the 12,000 grit, particularly on acrylics or anything that I've maybe sprayed a clear coat on, not a matte clear, but a high gloss, anything high gloss, whether I'm using a spray-on acrylic clear, or you'll see that I actually use what's called CA glue. It's cyanoacrylate super glue, in layman's terms. It's got an activator to it, so it gets really hard. It's very, very durable, but it is basically a plastic. And as you're using that material and you want to build luster into it, after you get done with the 12,000 grit, you're going to use a little bit of this. This is a liquid, but it's finer yet. It is truly a polish. Do not think that you're going to get sanding scratches out of this. This is only to add the next level of shine to your piece. This is strictly just for making a mirror-like finish on your pieces. And I use this stuff extensively, but I have had this bottle here for well over a year now, and I'm not even halfway through it. So it lasts a long time. You don't need a ton of it. As you can see on the front of it, it works good for plastics, plexiglass, corian, formica, anything that you want a high luster to, and it does not dry out when you're spinning it on the lathe. And you're not really running your lathe up to the max speed to put this particular stuff on, but it's not like a wax on your car where it dries out really fast. It stays real liquid, so it does allow you to polish the material up really nice, get a good luster. Again, if you're going to use a matte clear, or you want the project to be more rustic or old or natural type finish to it, don't do this. This is only going to add a layer of luster to it that you don't want at that point. Same thing with the micro mesh pads. You probably don't need to touch it with the micro mesh pads, or not very many of them, maybe just one or two, because it's going to put too much luster into your piece. And that's really what I'm going to end up doing with this walnut. I'm not going to make that a high gloss, I don't think. It's going to be more natural, matte finished. So that kind of runs through how we're going to go about this project. So some of the raw materials that go into it, again, the tooling that's needed on the lathe, the sanding that goes into behind it. And as I'm talking through this, it probably seems like, oh man, this is a day just to make one. It's not, guys. You can either do one of these and run through every step and then go back and do a second one, a third one, whatever. Or what I've started doing, because I usually get several of these done in a run, is I'll go through the first step, I'll make them all round. Then I'll take the material off, I'll put the next one out and make it round. I'll do 2, 3 of those, make them all round. Then I'll put them back on there, I'll cut my dimension. and then I'll take them off, and then I'll put all 3 of them on, and I'll do the next step. I'll go for the sanding, and I'll go through all of the sanding steps, and then once I'm all done with the sanding steps, I'll do all 3 of them again, and I'll do the polishing steps. And that way, when I come to assemble it at the end, I've got 3 or 4 or whatever blanks. This stuff is already done. It's already sanded and polished the way that I want it. Whether it be rustic or whether it be high luster, they're done. So all that we've got to do is now assemble the kits into them. We'll probably show that in a separate step. It might end up being a separate video. I don't know yet. But it's kind of a production line idea. You're getting 4 of them ready to go. So that's your raw material. And then you're going on to the next step, the next step, the next step with all 4 of them. So that's just how I choose to do it. But when you first start out, you're probably not going to be able to do that. It's going to take you longer, just a learning curve. So you might only get 1 of these done a day. If you're good and you've got prior experience doing this kind of work, maybe you get a couple of them done if you're really wanting to turn them out. But you can spend as much time as you want or as little really as you want. It depends on how good you are at it. When I first started out, I didn't have one of these chucks. So I had a different method for securing these and drilling them and going through the process, but the chuck was a worthwhile investment. Made sense based upon how many of these things I've been making. And so, I bought it. And so there's different ways to either speed up or slow down. If it's a hobby and you're not selling them, then maybe you're only worried about making 1 of them a day or a couple a day, or maybe you don't have a whole day to devote in your shop. Maybe you only got 3-4 hours. That's what's nice about this. You spend 3 hours in your shop. There's some steps along the way that maybe you want to leave a little dry time on when you get to either finishing or when you're gluing the tubes in. Maybe you want to leave those sit for a couple hours. But really, if you already had your tubes glued in and you were ready to start turning, you could turn one of these out start to finish in just a couple hours at the most. If you're fast, even faster than that. But you got 2-3 hours to spend, you could easily start to finish this project. And that's another thing that I really like about this project is that, as I said in the prior video, I like instant gratification. Or I'm not one of those that could plan out like building a piece of furniture where it takes you 6 months to do it. I'm going to lose interest before then, and it's going to end up in several half-completed projects, portions of it laying in the side of the garage or side of the shop waiting for me someday to get back to it, which is never going to happen. And I'm going to cut it up and turn it into kindling or, cut it down to smaller projects. I got to have it done faster than that, guys. A lot of people are engineered for that type of thing, and I am not one of them. So I recognize that. The other thing is as I've said in the prior videos, is I'm working in a 2-car garage. Really, for this type of stuff, I'm really working in less than a 1-car garage. It just does not take up that kind of space. The equipment that I've had, I've got a lot of workbenches in here. And I have a big, fairly good-sized bandsaw. Guys, this is as you've seen before, I've shown many videos of this thing. We're getting almost to the end here, so stay with me. This bandsaw is probably one of my favorite tools. I would like to have a different one someday. I really wanted a different one when I bought this, but this was the right price and kind of the right dimensions for stuff that I was looking for. The power, the area that I can cut with it, the size of material that I can cut with it. It's a little small for some of the logs that I cut, but I can work with it. So, but guys, this is a big one. This is a floor-mounted piece. The base is factory. So the legs that you see down there at the bottom, they are factory. That's what came with this saw. The only additions is the metal panels there that you see Blue Goose Company. This is used. That's not my logo, but kind of funny because Blue Goose used to be an airline that flew into Kalamazoo, Michigan, my hometown. So I thought it was funny when I bought it. But somebody added those metal panels to it just to enclose the bottom of it and use it as it's got a door on the back that you can use as a shelf for all your blades. I've got a lot of different blades in there. But this saw here, the point of what I was saying is, if you're working in a small shop, or you had a spare bedroom or something like that that you were working out of in your apartment or home or whatever, there's, for doing pens and bottle stoppers and small projects like this that we've talked about, this saw is way overkill. You don't even really need a bandsaw, truthfully. If you're buying your raw materials, you're buying these blanks like I showed, and you're not going to cut your own out of larger material. If you're just going to buy the blank themselves, you don't need a saw for this at all. You could do this with a small little craft saw, because the only thing that you're going to do is, well, you would need a drill, but you're going to drill the center of this, insert your brass tube in it, and you're going to cut the end off however long that brass tube is. So one of the other things that I have used along the way is this is a little hacksaw. But as you can see, guys, this thing is tiny. It's not going to take up any room in my toolbox. And you get a lot of different blades for it, coarse and fine and all that. But this saw cuts through this acrylic like butter. So it does a really nice job, and that's all that you need to cut this down. I do it on the equipment that I have because I have the equipment. So if your shop you're not wanting to spend the money, which this isn't an expensive saw by any means, a couple $100. But if you're not willing to spend the money, or you don't have the room, don't have the need to have that type of saw, they make smaller versions of this that just go right on top of your bench. You can buy them for $50 used. This was used when I got it, and it runs like a champ. Drill presses, you don't need a drill press. If I were going to tell you, if you're interested in this type of manufacturing or this type of kit project, don't buy a drill press. Buy this chuck. Buy this chuck and this drill chuck and this Nova chuck, or a version similar to it. Get yourself a good set of pen jaws for it, like I have here, and you will never regret the money that you spent. $180 on this, or whatever it was, and I think less than $20 on the drill chuck. And use this as your drill press, and you can, I'm not going to show you, but you can easily do that on your lathe. That lathe was a couple $100. I bought it used with the extension, and again, it runs like a champ. This lathe is still manufactured under many different brand names, but this lathe is about $299 for the lathe itself, brand new, and it's quiet. And then I think the extension, you can get them on sale $60, $80 maybe, $100. I can't remember for sure, but for $400 brand new, all in on the lathe, and you got a piece of equipment that's going to last you a long time. This is not a high-end lathe by any means, but for doing this stuff, even as small as it is, it's got plenty of precision to do what you're going to do. So if you wanted to get yourself set up in a small shop or a bedroom, you live in an apartment, whatever it is, I probably couldn't live in an apartment again, but even if I did, as long as there was a small corner that was kind of away from everything, 'cause this will get dusty, but as long as there was a small corner to work in, a closet or whatever, that I could kind of partition off an area and have the dust not get away from me, I could work out of an apartment or a one-car garage, a spare bedroom easily. So y'all have seen this one before. Initially, I did make my own drill press, and that thing works great. It's very true. It's very square in its cuts. And aside from that, it was a fun project. There's a lot of different plans out there for making something similar to this, but this was a great fun project. I did not make this from plans. I did not even draw out plans for this. I built this as I went and just thought through it and said, how could I do this? I mean, I got some ideas from other people's videos and other people's plans, but, I just came up with it, and it works great. It works fine. I don't use it for this anymore because I have the chucks. You don't need a drill press. as I said before, but this one worked out great just as a project in and of its own. It's kind of getting to the point where maybe I don't want it, maybe I don't need it. It is taking up a little bit of space, not too much right now, but that may end up going by the wayside. I don't know yet. I hate to get rid of it because it was so much fun to build, and nobody else is going to have one. You know, that's the other thing about this stuff, guys, is that nobody else has it. Yeah, somebody might make the same pen or the same ripper as what you do, but everybody's style is going to be different. Even if you tried to reproduce the same one yourself, you're not going to. So, long enough, guys. Get out there, create something. I won't add on to this video to show you how the turning goes, or you've seen that in another video. Maybe I'll do a video at the end to show you how they turned out. But I appreciate you hanging in for those that stayed all the way until the end. Once again, any support that you give is greatly appreciated. Hit that thumbs up button. Like the video, share the video. Most importantly, subscribe to the channel. So that doesn't cost you guys anything. And as you subscribe, you probably already know this, but as you subscribe, it's going to show up in your feed or your subscriptions button on YouTube. You hit that, and this will show up there for you to watch. If you like the content, great. I appreciate it. If you've got suggestions, feel free to let me know in either the comments. You can email them to me, tailoredturnings@gmail.com. Don't forget Instagram. There should be a link out there for that, but Tailored Turnings, at Tailored Turnings, I guess. That's my Instagram account. You can send messages through there. You can see some of the projects that I've completed. I've got some seam rippers, or one or two out there anyway. And then there are plenty of pens. There's some other projects that I've made that you can take a look at, maybe get some inspiration. But making these videos is not easy. It is time consuming, but I like making the videos, and it's using another part of my brain other than work or projects. Not a lot of editing going on to these ones. I've explained that ad nauseum. So right now I'm just not going to do a lot of editing. But get out there, try something. If you have questions on it, reach out to me. This is all a community, so reach out to me. Let me know if there's anything that I can do. Sorry, my hand gets to shaking. Too much coffee. If there's anything that I can do to help you in the hobby that you're in, come together, form some ideas, reach out to me, let me know. Again, guys, I appreciate it. I'll end the video here, but thanks again, and we'll see you on the next go around. Have a good day, guys.